Jazz 88.3 and the New Jazz Thing. Music there from guitarist Cheryl Bailey. A Meeting of the Minds is the name of her new release. And her original composition, An Unexpected Turn, is what we're listening to there on the New Jazz Thing. You're listening to the New Jazz Thing. My name is Vince Outlaw. Joining us this evening in the Jazz 88 studios is Martin Piecuch. This native of Maine became a soloist, saxophone soloist with the U.S. Marine Band. He holds a Bachelor of Music degree in each woodwind instrument, summa cum laude, and an M.M. in orchestral conducting from Catholic University of America, studying with Frederick Fennell. He's the founder and director of the Washington Woodwind and Saxophone Quartet, guest flutist at Kennedy Center in Carnegie Hall, and from 1963 through 1992, saxophone soloist with the National Symphony Orchestra under Aaron Copland, Antal Dorati, and Julius Rudel. He accompanied Beverly Sills, Henry Mancini, Dinah Shore, Johnny Mathis, and Anthony Newley at Kennedy Center, Wolf Trap, National, and Ford's Theaters. He served on the faculties of St. Mary's College, Howard University, and Catholic University of America. He's also married to stage director Elizabeth Falk, and a fantastic story about how they were married, if we can get to that. Elizabeth's with us in the studio this evening, too. His time spent in Russia is of note. He's played with many orchestras and directed many orchestras in Russia. In 2005, he made his debut as guest conductor of the St. Petersburg Philharmonic. In 2003, named permanent guest conductor of the Moscow Philharmonic, and conducted, as I said, numerous other Russian orchestras. And he's been presented the Bronze Medal by Russia's Minister of Culture. In 2013, he released Jazzical Fusion, and Albert Regini, a saxophonist for the New York Philharmonic, said, "It's a delightful potpourri of music from classical, samba, and jazz baroque, with a few other styles added in. It's a remarkable display of versatility, styles, and hip arrangements." And something of note to us jazz supporters and advocates, the role of arts in the community. And here's a quote from our guest tonight, Martin Piecuch. "When the arts are alive and well in a community, humanity, the highest form of life, is elevated by the highest forms of communication, creative spirit, inspired vision, expressive movement, and beautiful music, in the sublime feeding of the soul. One has only to seek the level of participation needed for personal fulfillment." That's what you do as you support jazz here as a member of Jazz 88. You seek the level of participation that you need for personal fulfillment. So that speaks very much toward us. Joining us tonight in the studio is Martin Piecuch from Jazzical Fusion. This is El Diablo Suelto on the New Jazz Thing, Jazz 88.3.
That means the devil on the loose.
I'm going to have you tell us all about it.
Both at 6 and 3 and 2. Is this a good distance?
That's good. And I'll adjust it a bit. Here we go. Jazz 88. And the new jazz thing and music there from Martin Piecuch. Jazzical Fusion is the name of the new release, and joining us in the studios this evening is Martin Piecuch. Martin, welcome to the new jazz thing.
Thank you, Vince. It's great to be here.
So we were listening to a tune right there called El Diablo Suelto, in which you play piccolo. You play flute, several different saxophones, alto, soprano, and more on your disc Jazzical Fusion, and feature all kinds of different music. Tell us a little bit about how you put together the music on Jazzical Fusion. Such a wide range of music and styles.
Well, it's as though you walk along doing many things in life, and all of a sudden it dawns on you that what you've been doing has another name. So I figured I've spent my life as a classical conductor and a classical player and a jazz player, but then they never got a chance to meet because I was usually having to cross the street to do one or the other, and particularly in our country, in America. But when I went to Russia, they loved the blend of them. In fact, with the St. Petersburg Philharmonic, I played, there's a concerto for jazz band and symphony orchestra by Rolf Liebermann, an amazing piece. And that, too, was about communication. Liebermann, who was a Renaissance man on his own, he was the president of the Paris Opera, as well as being an incredible composer and a conductor. So he wrote this piece because he wanted to force communication between jazz musicians and classical musicians. This is a remarkable piece. It's a 12-tone piece, has 10 different movements, some for jazz, just the jazz orchestra, some just for the symphony, and then some combined. And it's this remarkable array sort of launched everything. And then it dawned on me that there are so many similarities as well as differences, that we put the album together, Jazzical Fusion. That first number that you heard is a joropo, which is the national hymn, the national song or dance of Venezuela. And I was playing in a jazz club down there 2 years ago, and I went down there, and knowing this tune because I played with a Latin band in Washington, D.C. for many years, and so they were glad that this gringo could play that song, and they invited me to come back and play some more with them.
So one of the interesting things about this disc and about your background trying to put these two together is when I think of classical music, I don't naturally think of Brazilian music and the rhythms here. And is that the jazzy side of you that you're trying to bring out, or are some of those pieces classical music from their native countries, as you were just talking about Venezuela?
Vince, you just hit on the entire reason for the evolution that we're in right now of putting labels on things. Because we used to say that classical music was legit. Does that mean that all of us in the jazz field are illegit? You see? Or, to be strictly technical, classical music was just in the period from the late 17th century into late 18th century, 17th century into the middle of the 18th century, through Mozart and so forth.
And in a particular culture and part of the world, right?
Right. And if you go into the 20th century and go to a symphony orchestra and you say they're playing classical music, well, they might be if they're playing music from that period.
Right.
It could be romantic music. It could be music from the modern period, and music from the impressionistic period. So instead of having to label all these things, is it or isn't it, I thought it's really good to meld it, and that's why I've sort of, one day it dawned on me I was a fusionist. So that's sort of the thing here. Now, as far as Brazil, as you mentioned, Brazil has its own history of classical music through the same period. We just didn't know about it.
Right, exactly.
They were doing the same thing, just like Bossa Nova was brought up to our country. It was snuck in by Stan Getz and Charlie Bird from Brazil. But the Brazilian music is fabulous music. And Villa-Lobos, whose piece is on the album here, melded in with theme from Black Orpheus.
Right.
But when you hear the two, you see, in fact, they're even in the same key. You see how these things do get melded and fused, and maybe let's take the label off and just call it thorough music, music that we love. And
excellent. Well, let's mention your collaborators on this. We heard the pianist that you play with. Tell us about your collaborators on Jazzical Fusion.
yes, Regan Reisig is a super musician. I had the occasion to meet him because he was the music director and conductor on a show that my wife, Elizabeth Falk, she was directing an off-Broadway show, and Regan was her musical director because he had to take and completely create a score from just some tunes that had been recorded in the black tradition of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I thought, wow, he's really very good at that. And then I found out he's a classical player and a classical composer. And I said, I've got to talk to this guy.
Sounds like a good match.
Yeah, it was terrific.
Excellent.
And Ron Murray, who is the guitarist, is in the same situation of being so versatile that it's hard to put a label on him because he plays classical music, Baroque music, flamenco music, and he studied with the experts, went over to Spain to learn it, and wonderful jazz. So, and he plays on our album. He's playing seven string guitar because there are times when he's down in the bass range or even impersonating a bass from time to time.
Excellent. Well, so this release came out near the end of last year. Have you been happy with kind of the response that you've gotten to it? Or?
With the personal response I've gotten has been great. This is my first time. I've put out classical albums before. I have an album called Sax with Strings Attached, which is the St. Petersburg Philharmonic String Quartet, the principal players, and myself on saxophone playing very unusual, wonderful music. But with this, I found out that I was not going to market it particularly, but there was a lot of good response from it. So I'm in the business as though I'm coming out of the cradle.
Right.
This is brand new for me.
Excellent.
So I've enjoyed the opportunities to play at Birdland and at Gitano's in New York and
some of the big spots in jazz. So
yes,
that's great.
it's great, as Carnegie Hall is, for the classical musicians.
Exactly.
And in fact, last night I played at Steamers up the coast a ways in Anaheim. In fact, with some terrific musicians. I don't know if you've heard of them. The leader of the band, his name is Miles Davis, and he's a very talented black trumpet player. And I asked him, I said, how have you got that name? And he said, well, my dad was a musician, and so he gave it to me. Can you imagine how that changes a person's life?
Yeah.
Here's a kid who is named Miles Davis. He grows up, and his father says, you must play trumpet because that's your name. And he's fabulous. He's very good, and he plays in Miles' style. He's taken this very seriously. Robert Perez was on the piano, and Nathan York on bass, and Nick Hunn on drums. And they are all young, some of them still in college.
Excellent.
And it's so heartwarming and encouraging to see such great power coming out of our youth.
Excellent. That's kind of what we love to do here at Jazz 88. One of the parts of our missions, in addition to playing new music and really trying to expand the repertoire of jazz, is jazz education also. And so to hear you appreciating new musicians who are expanding the art is a fantastic thing. You brought your saxophone in with you tonight, and I know we're going to play another tune from your disc, but if we can hear something from you live in the studio, that would be fantastic. What do you want to play for us tonight?
Well, I was thinking, one of the most profound experiences I had was when I was playing in Russia, and playing in Russia, in Vladivostok, Russia, and we played the Tchaikovsky concerto, piano concerto, and the Dvorak Eighth Symphony, and at the end of the concert, we played "Stars and Stripes Forever." What pride I had to have to bum bum dee da 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 da, and we did it in the American tradition, in the Sousa tradition, that as he describes must happen. The piccolos came down on the apron and played the obligato, then the brass, trumpets, trombones, tubas, and the baritone came down into the center stage and blew the whole audience away. They'd never heard anything like this before. We had to play it 3 times. After that, I went off stage and I brought my soprano sax back on, and I played Amazing Grace. I'd like to play that now.
Excellent.
Another interesting thing about that is people were asking me what Amazing Grace was. What did this mean? And Izmituni Mila is the Russian term for it. And I got into such a philosophical discussion, especially with my limited Russian, on describing what grace was, because it couldn't come in as a we take this as having the grace of God, and it's described in the Russian terms as not having anything to do with God, but rather having the grace, the good grace to do something, the graciousness of someone. So a whole different thing.
Complex concept to try to explain.
Yeah, and then they got the part about God.
Right.
So
excellent.
Very interesting.
Well, joining us this evening here in the Jazz 88 studios is Martin Piecuch. His release from last year was called Jazzical Fusion. We're going to hear another tune from that to close things out in a bit, but he's brought his saxophone, and we're going to hear something Amazing Grace from him right here on the New Jazz Thing, Jazz 88.3. Jazz 88.3 in the new Jazz thing. Music there from Martin Piecuch. Let me adjust your your mic, Martin. Thank you so much for that fantastic rendition of Amazing Grace. Martin Piecuch, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
So, Martin, I wanted to kind of go back a little bit and ask you how you got involved in music in the first place. You were born in, or you're from Maine. How were you introduced to music?
Well, it's a two-beer story, or maybe fine...
I'm good with those kind of stories.
or fine Tempranillo wine. But when I was in... after having flunked a musical aptitude test in 4th grade, because it really wasn't an aptitude test, as it turns out it was a musical awareness test. I had none of it. So I was considered a poor candidate to get one of the 12 or 15 instruments that the school rented for $5 a year. They wanted to get those in the right hands.
Right.
So the teacher came up to me and says, God still loves you. You're going to be an okay human being. You just go right along. You're just not going to be playing one of these instruments. So I never thought about it again until my grandmother, in the summer of before I went into 6th grade, went up into the attic and brought my father's saxophone down and said, here, let Martin take this home. And it was absolute love at first sight.
Excellent.
So I went home, and I was not allowed to touch it because it was a professional instrument, and my dad said, you must wait until the band director tells you what to do with it.
Right.
So we kept it under their bed. And I had a parade of my friends into their bedroom every day, and pulling the case out, I could open it, but don't touch. And you can imagine how ready I was when the first day to take the saxophone to school came. I never put it down.
So then how did you know, at what point did you know that you wanted to make music your life, a life study and an occupation for you?
You know, this may sound very strange, but Vince, the first day I had the horn in my hands, that very first day I knew I wanted to do something in music. Obviously, I didn't know anything about music, so I didn't know what I was going to do. But I stayed on it, and that's why I felt so fortunate. I mean, the practicing did pay off because I got into the U.S. Marine Band in Washington when I was only 18 years old. So, and that's the advice I would have for anyone who's going to be playing, who is playing instruments. Stay with it, stay on it, and your dream. And chase your dream. Excellent.
So how did you get introduced to jazz music in particular?
When I was 14 years old, our school had a big band. I started the big band in our school. So I had a reputation in the small town of Lockport, New York. There was one high school in there. And anyway, I got a call to the Musicians Union Trust Fund played free big band concerts in the park. So I was so thrilled to be playing the lead alto part at 14 in this band in Lockport. And we used to rehearse in Lorraine Lauer's living room with her piano and everything, and there were times where the whole big band just you'd expect the walls of the house to bulge out. But that's where the idea of improvising and have music having no barriers, because a lot of the players there were also in the classical music and everything. So it was never a this or a that. And that's kind of how, so that in a matter of speaking, diversity becomes my specialty.
Excellent. Well, Martin, it's been fantastic to chat with you and talk with you and to kind of learn how this broad range of music kind of come together on Jazzical Fusion. Where can folks find out more information about you? You have a website? Or
I do, and I have the most difficult last name to spell, so get out your pencils. But it's my name, 3 W's, my name, and .com. So my name is Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N. Last name, Piecuch, and that's Piecuch.com. And I would invite you to go there, and you'll see some interesting stories about my Russian conducting, which has
Excellent.
changed my life forever.
And we've put a link to that out on the jazz88.org blog under tonight's show. So we've got the post out there at jazz88.org/blog. And we've got a link under Martin's name to his website. So if you don't remember the spelling of the name, just going out to jazz88.org, which you're all familiar with, and out to the blog, and there's a link to Martin Piecuch's website there. So we're concluding this evening with another tune from Jazzical Fusion, and the tune that we chatted about, Love Theme from Romeo and Juliet. Tell us a little bit about how this flows into Angel Eyes also.
All right. By way, first of all, the saxophone that they've been hearing was a soprano sax.
Mm-hmm.
This will be on an alto sax. And conducting in Russia, as I said earlier, it's changed my life forever. I've had a chance to conduct in Moscow Philharmonic, St. Petersburg Philharmonic, Krasnoyarsk, Vladivostok, just on and on. I'm so blessed to have had that opportunity. Tchaikovsky, of all of these composers, is one of the most well-known, and it's impossible to say somebody has their most beautiful tune, or the best composer. We don't even need to go there when they're so good as this. But Tchaikovsky's theme to Romeo and Juliet is the da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee da da. I'm outlining a chromatic line, which means half steps. So playing that melody comes out of the cracks of the piano. It's not just all the white notes or all the black notes. A lot of harmonics of chromatic changes. And in Angel Eyes, da 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 da, da dee da 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 dee da. A lot of chromaticism in there too. So that pulled them together, and I think there's almost a common DNA in the direction that the two melodies taken. Both of them are very passionate melodies.
Yeah. Well, Angel Eyes is a fantastic tune that lots of jazz fans know a lot about. So very interested to hear how this blends together. Martin Piecuch, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight on the New Jazz Thing and bringing your wife and friends with us here. And did you want to introduce?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bill Hayworth is probably no stranger here in the San Diego area because he's been here for 30 years. He got the message a lot of times I get the message late. He got the message a lot earlier than I did about how great it is to live out here. He's one of your area's best pianists, and he's a fusionist too, which is why we work so well together in Washington. He's a fine classical player, a knockout jazz pianist. He's a church choir conductor and an organist, so I mean this is a thorough musician.
Right.
Bill Hayworth.
Bill, and then your wife is here with us too.
My wife is a stage director, Elizabeth Falk, and we met on stage in an opera, she directing and me conducting. And when it came to, I got a call, I was in Washington and she lived in New York, I got a call from the director of the Asian American Opera Company, and she said that I had been requested by the composer to conduct this work. It was a world premiere. And I said, great, I'd be happy to. I'm honored. Who's going to conduct? And she said, well, we've got somebody coming down from New York. I said, from New York? What is this? We're here. We don't have any good directors here in Washington. It was an attitude of, everybody's from New York. Now I'm from New York. So this is many years later. But she said, this woman is a fabulous director, and I think you'll like her. And I really did.
There you go. Excellent. Well, Martin, thanks again for coming down to Jazz 88. Hopefully enjoy your time here on the West Coast and in San Diego, and look forward to hearing more from you in the coming days.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Martin Piecuch right here from Jazzical Fusion. This is Love Theme from Romeo and Juliet and Angel Eyes on the New Jazz Thing, Jazz 88.3. Excellent. Great.
All right.
Thank you.